it's important to define democracy. People vote for a representative. The representative make the civil rights. This is really come with division of power. Capitalism is an economic system in which an owner has industries, and that these industries are managed by other people that have other people working for them. This is entirely private.
In North America, in 1807, the U.S. Congress banned the exportation and importation of the black people, having three main causes: the rebellions against their masters, the political irrationalities that were entering the American minds, and the 1887 Constitution that tried to abolish this exportation but failed, having the consequence of no support from the federal government, allowing the straight slavery for a very long time. In North America in 1814, treaty ends the war between America and the British. Both countries had seen the death of many soldiers, making them weak against other countries, make the cause of the treaty. Having the consequence of the commander's death because this information was not known, and the USA commander sent troops to the British commander, having the commander death and British retreat, giving Canada a nationality. In North America, the American Civil War happened between 1861 and 1865. The main causes was the party of Abraham Lincoln, the Union that wanted the North and the South Union. But the North wanted slavery down and the South wanted slavery. The main consequence of this civil war were the Union won and slavery was out, but Abraham Lincoln was dead. In North America, these three events helped democracy and capitalism by banning or at least trying to ban slavery and having good relationship between countries. Democracy is about the voice of the citizens and equality. These three events help by giving equality and stability to the country and helping with the politics and economics.
The independence. People want to be free, they didn't want to be ruled by a foreign king, so they decided to be independent. As a consequence, the first empire began with Iturbide. Next, Leyes de Reforma, with Benito Juárez and Lerda de Tejada, which were the creators of these laws. They consist in helping the people looking for equality among them. A consequence will be Guerra de Reforma, with the president Benito Juárez being liberal and Félix Zuluaga being conservative. Last but not least, the Porfiriato. A cause of this event will be Brenda, which consists in Porfirio wanting to destroy Benito Juárez. He succeeded, so the Porfiriato began. He ruled for 30 years. He elected himself several times. During his reign, he did a great job. He brought the capitalism, he made the railroads, the mail, he developed Mexico in good ways. In the late of the 19th century in Mexico, the capitalism was really high, thanks to the Porfiriato that brought the capitalism with them by bringing foreign companies to here. The democracy was a subject not so seen in that time, thanks to the president elected himself several times and nobody said anything. So in conclusion, capitalism was really high and democracy was really low.
Latin American revolutions. The causes were the Creoles, the Slav, Spain and Portugal dominance, the 1990s, and the period of weakness of European countries. The consequences were lots of losses in people, property, and livestock, the end of the colonial rule, and the Chaldeans took over power. Venezuela. This year, Napoleonic Wars gave an opportunity to begin the independence movement. Simon Bolivar was the leader. His army was very efficient. It was called the Army of Liberation. They have 6 successful engagements against Spain. Then, Simon Bolivar entered to Caracas as a liberator. He took political control, and later on Venezuela would be part of the Grand Colombia. Brazil was the only country who didn't need of revolutionaries. its independence was almost by unanimity. An uprising in Pernambuco was suppressed by a 3-month campaign. Don Pedro created a ministry who advocated independence. Then he created the Great Open Air Assembly that gave independence. Chile. In Chile, the leader of the struggle was José San Martín, who had passed years planning the independence. In 1817, it was ready, so they decided to go to the Andes to fight the Spanish. This journey was extremely dangerous, and it was considered an amazing feat. So, Spanish were surprised, and in the Battle of Jacobo, this movement was called like this, Chile troops crushed Spain. The independence was accomplished. Latin America. The level of capitalism and democracy after the previous events were in democracy, the colonial rule was over. Nationalism was acquired and they could choose their own governments. But capitalism was affected because of this. Why? Because they needed to industrialize and they didn't have the money, so they needed to export goods and raw materials to the West, and this made them European dependent again. Also, the US applied the Monroe Doctrine, who said that the West couldn't make any intervention in the Latin Americas. The unification of Italy. The three main causes were that the country was Moroccan, Austria didn't have any alliances, and the Franco-Prussian War. Here, Austria was the dominant of the Italian peninsula, so Italian state acted as for help to Piedmont. Camillo Jacobo, the prime minister, made a policy of economic growth for the army, but the Prussian army was not enough, so they asked for help to France, who accepted. Garibaldi was in the south with a war on volunteers. State by state, Italian unification was accomplished, but the Franco-Prussian War gave them Rome. The two main consequences were nationalism was accomplished and France was no longer a European power. The unification of Germany. The unification of Germany occurred because of three main causes. The conservative was broken, nationalism desires, and Prussia was now an economic power. In here, Germany asks Prussia for leadership. Prussia accepts because they wanted power and land. So, a parliament was created and King William, the old king of Prussia, was the new king of Germany. The two main consequences or effects were that Germany was now the strongest power in Europe and the nationalism desires were achieved. The Crimean War. In the Crimean War, there were three main causes. The long-term struggle between the Ottoman Empire and Russia. The Ottoman Empire was in decline, and Russia wanted the darkness that will give it access to have the control of the Mediterranean and vast seas that will give him two main things, power and navy. What does it mean? Russia will become a huge major power of Europe, and it will give his navy lots of power, enough to challenge Great Britain's navy. Great Britain and France were feared about this, so they declared war to Russia. This war was poorly planned and obviously poorly fought. So the Treaty of Paris was signed, and this war was over. They have three consequences. The country of Europe was broken, it gave the opportunity of the unifications, and Russia and Austria relationship was over. The level of capitalism and democracy in Europe after this event can be classified in continental and regional. In continental, it decreased democracy because it affected the forms of government of the previous owners of the states. Alliances were broken and this affected the trade, which decreased capitalism. In regional, it increased democracy because the unification was accomplished. Now they could choose the form of government. They could industrialize, like in Germany, that became the major European power, and nationalism desires were get.
In the Middle East, there was the fall of the Ottomans that was caused by the European countries wanting to expand, the economic problems, and the government becoming less centralized. The effect were the unification made by the Ottomans fell, the French took Islamic territories, and the countries like Turkey gained independence.
Also in the Middle East, there was the Crimean War, which was caused by Russia wanting to expand south, Napoleon wanting to make France powerful again, and Britain had important colonies in India and didn't want Russia to take over them. Finally, the effects of the Crimean War was that everyone lost land. Australia, which was neutral in all of the Crimean War, was isolated because everybody wanted it to help, and this led to Italy and German unification. In the Middle East, the Treaty of Zenteno was caused by Russia declaring war to the Ottomans, Russia wanting land from the Ottomans, and Russia not being able to protect Christian Orthodox in the empire. Finally, the effects were the peace settlement, the creation of Slav states of Bulgaria, and the creation of Montenegro. The fall of the Ottomans in the Middle East helped democracy and capitalism because by falling apart and separating all those countries, now there was more competition, making capitalism, and there were more ideas getting through the countries, and more people wanted a democracy.
In Africa happened the scramble for Africa, that was the invasion of African territory. The main causes were the European powers during the new imperialism and the search for natural resources of the continent. The main consequences was 90% of the continent was under Europe control and chaos of them controlled the continent. In Africa, the Berlin Conference happened that was the division for the African colonization of Africa. The main causes were the political and economic rivalities among the European Empire and the military influence that Africa will bring. The main consequences were the transition of informal imperialism to colonial imperialism. In Africa, the colonization of the Congo happened, having the causes of local second of Belgium organized the International Africa Association, having the treaties with the Turks, producing enough land to form the Congo Free State and Congo as a source of ivory and rubber for Belgium.
In Africa, these three events didn't help democracy or capitalism because three events were about monarchy, imperialism, and colonization. Europe wanted to govern Africa without the permission of Africa and not giving equality or stabilization to the country, and just exploiting the African, contradicting the capitalism.
One of the countries that was having the most trouble in the 19th century in Asia was China with the Opium War. One of the main causes was the inequality of exchange and import between Britain and China. And Britain was giving so little amount of goods to China that China was giving so much to Great Britain. So Britain made requests to China about making the exchange more equal. However, China refused. To make the exchange more equal, Britain had to start exporting opium to the Chinese, creating an opium addiction for the Chinese, leading to the Opium War. Finally, the effects were that since the British won, China had to accept their terms, which was opening a lot of ports and living under their rules. So now China had a lot of free trade with other countries, and China had to pay $9 million to the Great Britain for opium destruction during the war. Was also having a lot of problems in Asia in the 19th century was Asia, with the Great Rebellion. The main cause of this was the disrespect of traditions, because the British lubricated their guns with cow and pig fat, while the Indians thought those animals were sacred. Another one of the causes was the spoils got less money than the British, and the spoils were considered less than a soldier. And finally, the Indian heirs were not considered princesses or princes. The effects of the Great Rebellion was that India lost, and Britain thought that they needed more control over the country. And they made Queen Victoria the ruler of India. And finally, they reduced the spoils by 40% to prevent that war from happening again. Japan in Asia was one of the countries also that was having a very important time, and with the Meiji Restoration. And the main cause was that Japan was isolated from everything. Commodore Perry asked Japan to open its ports, and because Japan was very scared and felt of it as a threat, it said yes. and Japanese realized they were very far back in technology. So they made the restoration, which led to the accelerated Japanese industrialization. Japan also gained a lot of power, and Japan made sure it didn't get the same luck as China had with the British.
In ancient past events helped both democracy and capitalism because opening ports helped more ideas to get through those countries and making democracy spread and more competition for the other countries